Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are again today, and we are looking at our Torah portions. And praise Abba Yahuwah, through much prayer and working through Abba, just to be able to get to the place of where I can continue with these Torah portions. And I know that it was a difficult time as I had lost my voice and I was sick. But by Abba Yahuwah's grace, we are here, and I can only really send out these Torah portions until Abba really speaks to me. It says, unless Yahuwah builds the house, the laborers labor in vain. And so I can only bring out these Torah portions as the Father opens them up to me and reveals them to me. I cannot sit and bring anything that the Father does not speak, and I need to have His understanding in the timing that we find ourselves in to understand the Torah portions that He's giving us in this hour. And so these Torah portions, interesting enough, that we are covering right now, was Torah portions that was given to us just before, at the time of when we were about to go into Sukkot, at the time of where we are just entering into the Sukkot and just as before Sukkot. And so that is why we are to understand what the Father was saying at that time when we started Sukkot, and He said, I put before you life and death, choose life. And at the end of the day, life and death is in the power of our tongue. And therefore, we need to be able to weigh our words very carefully. And we need to understand what it is that the Father is telling us in this hour, as we find ourselves in a time in the world where the world is in great turmoil. And it's certainly not getting any brighter. As a matter of fact, it's just getting darker. And therefore, we need to understand, who do we stand with? Like the question that the Father asked me, who do you stand with, my child? Everybody at this hour is standing with something or someone. I stand with Yahuwah. I stand with His word. I stand with the truth of who He is, because life and death is in the power of my tongue. And knowing what I stand for limits what I fall for. So if I stand for, if there's mixed seed, a little bit of good with a little bit of evil, then I'm still standing for what is Babylon. Because Babylon is confusion. And Babylon is mixture. Truth mixed with lie. So in the hour that we're in, it's very significant that we are to choose. Because you see, this very Torah portion is, she is with seed. She conceives. So what are we giving birth to? What are we conceiving? What are we birthing? Are we birthing life? Are we birthing death? What do we stand for? What do we stand with? So it's very significant that these Torah portions come through for us to understand. We need to understand the hour that we are in, and discerning the hour that we are in, and not be deceived, because there's many false things that is out there, and not everything is as it seems. It's like the world is an illusion. The world is a merry-go-round. It's a merry-go-round. And you can either be in the merry-go-round and go with all the excitement in the merry-go-round, or else you can step out of the merry-go-round and understand that that is the reality. But everything around us, the media and all of that, is going to give us a merry-go-round. And we're either going to find ourselves having to swirl in the merry-go-round and be oblivious to the reality of what is really going on around us, or else we are going to come out of that merry-go-round and put our eyes on Yeshua and stand with Abba Yahuwah and His word, because that's the only place to stand, because we have to stand for His truth of His word. And in the truth of His word, there's no mixed seed. And that is why we cannot stand with mixed seed. We need to stand with the truth. Let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise you, and I just want to thank you, my Father, for your word. I thank you that your word is the truth by which we stand. I thank you for this Torah portion of Tazria. What are we birthing? What are we conceiving? Are we conceiving evil, or are we conceiving good? Are we giving out seeds with our mouths that will bring about evil, or are we conceiving that which is going to be the truth? Are we bringing out with our mouths mixed seed, or are we bringing out with our mouths the truth of His word? And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you for your word. I thank you that you speak to my mind, speak through my lips, the very oracles that will come from your heartbeat. Abba, we are in an hour now more than ever that we truly need to hear your heartbeat. We cannot hear what the world is doing, because the world is a stage, and people in the world are like puppets being able to be pulled by strings in order to play out in this stage. But Abba Yahuwah, I pray that you would help us to remove the scales from our eyes for us to be able to see the truth. And that it's only the truth of your word that we can stand by, that will truly bring deliverance, that will truly bring the truth, because that which you have spoken is that which is the truth, and that which has been will be again. And you are going to stand by your word. You are not going to stand by emotional hype, but you're going to stand by your word, and your word is the final authority. So I thank you that we can hear your word, that you can speak to us the very oracles that you want to give us in this hour, so that we can move forward in this time that we find ourselves in this very dark days that are upon us and going to get darker as the time is drawing near of your coming. Because this is what has already been written in the word, and we cannot pray away what you've already spoken in your word. So I thank you, Father, that this Torah portion may be able to speak to us, may be able to help us to be able to understand in a deeper revelation that which you are trying to tell us in this hour. In Yeshua's name I pray this. Amen and amen. So we are looking at this Torah portion, and this Torah portion that we are looking at is this Torah portion of Tazria. And Tazria means she is with seed, she conceives. So as we are conceiving within us, as we have seed within us, as we're giving birth to things in this earth, what are we conceiving with our words? What are we conceiving with our thoughts? Because our words become our actions. Our thoughts become our words. Our words become our actions. And our actions become our destiny. So what did you think today that you're going? What did you think yesterday that you're going to speak today that you're going to become tomorrow? Because at the end of the day, that's the reality of where we stand. Because what you think, what you filter through your eyes, what you filter through your ears, is what enters into the mind, which is what enters into the heart. And out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Because if it wasn't the Father who spoke it, if it isn't lining up with His word, and it's just filters that is filtered into your ears, filters that is filtered through to your eyes. You're going to meditate on it in your mind. That is eventually going to be able to come into your heart. That is eventually going to be able to be spoken out of your mouth. That is eventually going to be able to become what you will walk out, because it shall become your belief system. And I think the Father in this hour is starting to shatter a lot of belief systems, because there's many things that we have heard, many things that we have seen, many things that we have understood that is not really lining up with the Father's word. And so that is why we are in an hour now, in a very critical hour, more than ever, that we are to return back to the Father's word. So we are looking at Leviticus chapter 12, and we are going to start reading from verse 1, and it says, "And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, when a woman has conceived and has given birth to a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of her monthly separation she is unclean. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin is circumcised, and she remains in the blood of her cleansing 33 days. She does not touch whatever is set apart, and she does not come into the set apart place until the days of her cleansing are complete." So here we see that if a male child is born, then you will be, a woman will be, a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. So for 7 days she is to separate herself. And then on the 8th day she comes and she is going to be able to circumcise that child. So when we look at Luke chapter 2, Yeshua really did fulfill this. Interesting how it says 33 days that he would have been unclean. For 33 days she remains in the blood of her cleansing 33 days. She does not touch whatever is set apart. Interesting how Yeshua's ministry on the earth was for 33 years. And for those 33 years he was upon the earth, he was without sin, but he was in a realm that is unclean, because the heavenly realm is nothing unclean. And he came into a realm to be able to dwell among a people that are people of unclean lips, people that have unclean hearts, people that have unclean thoughts, just like Isaiah said, I'm a man of unclean lips. And that the seraphim came to be able to put a coal of fire on his lips to cleanse his speech, because he understood that his flesh with his lips are unclean. And Yeshua's dwelling amongst us came to be able to bring that blood, the blood that came to cleanse us after 33 years of being on the earth. His blood finally came to redeem the uncleanness that he would have been unclean as a child for 33 days, that his mother would have been set apart. She would have had to be able to touch nothing that was clean. And Yeshua, in those 33 years of his ministry, he was on the earth, in an earth that was unclean, to be able to then die at the stake, resurrect, and that his blood could become the ultimate sacrifice on the earth to redeem us from all our uncleanness. And that is what we've got to understand. So when we look at Luke chapter 2, let's look at Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, and we're going to read from verse 21. And it says, "And when 8 days were completed for him to be circumcised, his name was called Yahushua, the name given by the messenger before he was conceived in the womb. So it doesn't matter how much blood has been shed, how much blood is shed on the ground. This is just coming to me now as I've just received this. Doesn't matter how much blood is shed on the ground. We are to remember that the blood of Yeshua has come to redeem us from our filthy, dirty place. And it says, and when 8 days were completed for him to be circumcised, his name was called Yahushua. So you see, it's the name of Yahushua who is the only deliverer, the only one by which we may be saved. No one is going to save anyone except through the name of Yeshua. People are delivered. If you want to be delivered, you need to be delivered by the name of Yeshua. And the name given by the messenger before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of her cleansing according to the Torah of Moshe were completed, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to Yahuwah. Understand, the days of her cleansing would have been the 33 days. After 33 days, she was able to come and present baby Yahuwah. As it has been written in the Torah of Yahuwah, every male who opens the womb shall be called set apart to Yahuwah. So he was first fruits offering that needed to be set apart. By him being the firstborn out of the womb, he is the firstborn set apart, redeemed unto the Father. And to give an offering according to what is said in the Torah of Yahuwah, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And see, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Shimon. And this man was righteous and dedicated, looking for the comforting of Israel, and the set-apart spirit was upon him. And it had been revealed to him by the set-apart spirit that he would not see death before he sees the Messiah of Yahuwah. And it came to be in the spirit into the set-apart place. And as the parents brought in the child, Yahushua, to do for him according to the usual practice of the Torah, then he took him up in his arms and blessed Allah and said, Now let your servant go in peace, O Master, according to your word, for our eyes have seen your deliverance. So do you see? Deliverance can only be through Yeshua. Peace can only really come when we have Yeshua dwelling in our hearts. Right now, there's many people praying for the peace of Jerusalem. The only way that the peace of Jerusalem is able to come is like when Yeshua stood and he said, O Israel, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you as a hen gathers her chicks under her feathers. So, they need to be able to understand that the only one that is going to be able to deliver them and bring peace, there's only peace, is a person. His Shalom. Yahushua is the Prince of Shalom. He's the Prince of Peace. How does one truly have peace in one's life without having Yahushua Messiah? How? Because he's the deliverance. He's our deliverer. He's our Savior. So the only way that we can pray for peace is to pray for Yeshua to come and deliver the people, to bring the peace that is needed for them to see him. That he would open the eyes of those that are blind, open the minds of those that are closed, set the captives free that are in the prisons bound in order to be able to see him. And so it says, For my eyes have seen your deliverance, which you have prepared before the face of all the peoples, a light for the unveiling of the nations, and the esteem of your people, Israel. So at the end of the day, we are to understand that the eyes need to be opened of the nations to see the light. The unveiling, the light for the unveiling of the nations. Now we've got to understand, we are not only called to pray, we are called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, but we are called to pray for the light of the nations, for Yeshua, who is the light of the nations, to be revealed, because the only way that we can truly have peace in the world that we live in is when people embrace the Messiah. So that is why we have been called, we have a mandate, we've been called to preach the gospel of deliverance, the truth of the foundations of the two pillars, spirit and truth, the truth of the word by the power of the Ruach HaKodesh, the spoken word and the written word on the tablets of our hearts, the spoken word by the Ruach of Yahuwah. And so he's the light that is coming to the nations. And Yosef and his mother were marveling at what was said about him. And Shimon blessed them and said to Miriam his mother, see, this one is set for a fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign spoken against. So he was going to be a sign. Many could say whatever, but Yeshua was a sign, and the sign that unfortunately many do not want to receive, including those residing in the land of Israel. They don't want to receive their Messiah. They don't want to hear about their Messiah. Yet, he is the only one that can bring true, lasting peace and true deliverance in a time of need. And so, if we go look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, it's talking about circumcision, where he's saying that on the 8th day, then the child was circumcised. So let us look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, because we need to understand that there was a covenant made with a people, a covenant of circumcision. Just that's why the child had to be, when a child is conceived and when he is born, when you give birth to the child, and then you will be set apart for 7 days, and then on the 8th day, the child is to be, you are going to be doing circumcision. So, in Deuteronomy chapter 30, from verse 6 it says, and Yahuwah your Lord shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yahuwah. So you see, we need to have circumcised hearts so that we truly love him. To love Yahuwah your Lord with all your heart, with all your being, so that you might live. So if we don't truly love him, if we don't truly bow our knee before him, and if he's not our first love, then we are not going to live. Because it says that's what you must do in order to live. And Yahuwah your Lord shall put all these curses on your enemies, on those who hate you, who persecute you. So you see, if you truly love Yahuwah, and you truly serve him, and you truly do what he's asked you to do, then he will put the curses on your enemies. But if you don't, your enemies will overtake you. And you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yahuwah. So what is the Father doing? The Father allows our enemies to destroy us. Why? Because we've gone astray. When we go astray and we are not serving him the way that we should, then we've got many enemies that befall us. And this is really what we will understand about Tazria, and about Metzora, to understand that these are illnesses. This is leprosy and illnesses that come upon our body. And our body becomes sick. But what is the reason for the sickness? Because if we really understand, he starts off Tazria with understanding that we are to have circumcision. And the circumcision is what sets us apart to be in covenant with the Father. So for you to truly be able to walk without having the Tazria, then we need to be able to circumcise our hearts. And that's why he says, and we need to love him, and we need to obey him. So that's why it says, you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yahuwah, and do all his commands, which I command you today. So if we're not going to obey, we can understand that we will reap upon us sicknesses in our bodies. And Yahuwah your Lord shall make you have excess in all the work of your hands, in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground for good. For Yahuwah turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers. If you obey the voice of Yahuwah, your Lord, to guard his commands and his laws. So do you see? Let's read that again. Let's read that again. Then we understand the truth of the Father's word for his people and for a nation that are called, if by his name, if there is a people that are called by his name, then what are they to do? If you obey the voice of Yahuwah your Lord, if you guard his commands and his laws which are written in this book of the Torah, if you turn back to Yahuwah your Lord with all your heart and with all your being, for this command which I am commanding you today, it is not too hard for you, nor is it far off. So this is what the Father is requiring. And if we're not going to do this, and so that's why he says, let's see what he says in verse 15. Let's see what he says in verse 14. For the word is very near you. So you see, his word goes forth. And we've got to take it into our minds, let it be in our hearts, and let the heart become circumcised. The mind, the will, and the emotions needs to become circumcised so that we may walk out what his word says. So he says, for the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, to do it. It's in your mouth, in your heart. He speaks it. It comes into your heart, and then you are to speak it, and you are to do it. See, I've set before you today life and good, death and evil. So, if we are not going to keep the Father's way and the Father's word, death and evil will come upon us. In that I am commanding you today to love Yahuwah your Lord, to walk in his ways, to guard his commands and his laws and his right rulings, and you shall live and increase, and Yahuwah your Lord shall bless you in the land which you go to possess. That is what he requires of us. We are to be obedient to his word. We are to be obedient to his commands. We are to love him. We are to be able to do what his word says. But if your heart turns away and you do not obey, and shall be drawn away, and shall bow down to other mighty ones and serve them, I have declared to you today that you shall certainly perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land. You shall not prolong your days in the land. So, if you want to dwell in a land that has been given promises, then you have to adhere by the promises of that he has adhered for that land, which you are passing over the Jordan to enter and possess. I have called the heavens and the earth as a witness today against you. I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore, you shall choose life so that you live, both you and your seed. Now, do you remember? This was the Torah portion that was just before we were entering into Sukkot. The word that was released at the beginning of Sukkot, the prophetic word out of my mouth was, I put before you life and death. Choose life. Obey my word. So he says, therefore, you choose life so that you live, both you and your seed, to love Yahuwah your Lord, to obey his voice, to cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, to dwell in the land which Yahuwah swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, to Yaakov, to give them. So if you want to dwell in a land that's called a land that is Israel, then you have to abide and adhere to what he has commanded. You can't be part of a mixed seed. You have to obey, because that's the promise that was made for the land. If it's not going to be that way, then the curse is going to come. And this is what we've got to understand. And that's why I'm saying, let us return back to the Word. Let us return back to the Word. Because we have to understand one thing: 70% of the people in the land of Israel do not keep his word at all. So we've got to understand the shaking. That is 70%. That is 2/3. Only 1/3 will keep his word. So we must understand what the Father's word says. This is the Father's word. This is his Torah portion. This is his Torah portion of the warning that he brought out at the beginning of when we started the Feast of Sukkot. And he said he was going to judge the fruit at the end of the Feast of Sukkot. I put before you life and death. Now you've got to understand something. This is his Torah portions that he has orchestrated for his timeline, not for the rabbinical timeline, which is not when the new year is, but according to his new year. And that is what we've got to be very aware of. So, if we go look at Jeremiah 4 verse 4. Jeremiah 4 verse 4. Circumcise yourselves unto Yahuwah, and take away the foreskin of your hearts, you men of Yehudah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my wrath comes forth like fire and burn, with none to quench it, because of the evil of your deeds. So you've got to understand, the Father is going to judge the evil of our deeds. If we are just going to be circumcised of the flesh and not circumcised of the heart, we have a problem. And if we are circumcised of the flesh, but we do not do what this word says, then who are we then? So let's go look at what the word says. Because in Romans 2, and this is the renewed covenant, and this is what the renewed covenant says, and that is why we've got to understand, what does the word say? Who are the true Yehudim? Who are the true Yehudim according to the word? So, for you to be a Yehudim, in the time in which we are living in the renewed covenant, he tells us who are the true Yehudim. So let's go and read in Romans chapter 2, and we are going to read from verse 23. You who make your boast in the Torah, through the transgression of the Torah, do you disrespect Eloah? So if you say you keep the Torah, but you disrespect the Torah, do you disrespect Eloah? For the name of Eloah is blasphemed amongst the nations because of you. Why? Because if you call yourself a child of the most living Yah, and you don't abide by the word, which is the word that is written in his word, especially if you are dwelling in a land that you are supposed to adhere to his way, and you are supposed to be the example that is supposed to reflect yourself before the nations, and you don't do that, then you are doing what? You are blaspheming. The name of Yahuwah is blasphemed amongst the nations because of you, as it has been written. 4. So you see, the blaspheming is not when we speak it and say, oh, we speak a name in a way that it shouldn't be. Blaspheming it is when we don't live what the word says. We degrade him. We disrespect him. we bring him into dishonor, and therefore we blaspheme him. And it says, for circumcision indeed profits, if you practice the Torah. So it doesn't help you that you are a baby, that you were born in a Jewish family, and you have gone and been circumcised because you happen to be Jewish. If you have circumcised yourself and you call yourself Jewish, then you have to adhere to a covenant that comes with that circumcision. So this is why he says, for circumcision indeed profits you. Practice the Torah. If you practice the Torah, but if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. So if an uncircumcised one watches over the righteousness of the Torah, shall not his uncircumcision be reckoned as circumcision? So do you see, when one who is uncircumcised but yet watches over Torah, like many are now returning back to ways of Torah, they might not be circumcised of the flesh, of a physical flesh, but they are allowing themselves to be circumcised of the heart. And they are now guarding Torah. They are now coming back to Torah. They are now keeping what Torah says. The Torah by the Spirit of Yahushua. And the uncircumcised by nature, who perfects the Torah, shall judge you. So the uncircumcised are going to judge the circumcised, who did not adhere to Torah. Shall judge you, notwithstanding letter and circumcision, as a transgressor of the Torah. So you see, the uncircumcised by nature, so even if by nature is uncircumcised, who perfects the Torah, who now comes and walks out what Torah says, shall judge you, who notwithstanding letter and circumcision are a transgressor of the Torah. For he is not a Yehudi. He is not a Yehudi who is so outwardly. So a Jew is not a Jew that you want to call yourself a Jew just because you are circumcised of your flesh. A Jew, a Yehudi, is he who is neither is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh, but a Yehudi is he who is so inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in spirit, not literally, whose praise is not for men, but from Eloah. So this is very critical for us to understand. So the true people of the Father, the true set-apart ones of the Father, are the ones who have circumcised their hearts and are walking out what Torah is saying. So, but a Yehudi is he who is so inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in spirit, not literally. So just because you go and you circumcise a man goes and circumcises his foreskin, that's not what makes him set apart. What makes him set apart is his inward circumcision of his heart, whose praise is not from men, but from Eloah. Why? Because he walks out Abba Yahuwah's ways. So if we go have a look at Ezekiel chapter 36, our famous scripture of Ezekiel chapter 36. So let us go read Ezekiel. From verse 24, and I shall take you from among the nations, and I shall gather you out of all the lands, and I shall bring you into your own land. So when the Father does that, so if the Father is really gathering his tribes from the nations, then he's doing another thing that comes with it. So if he is the one, not man birthing their own tribes, not man saying, you are this because you have been gathered out of the nation, because you call yourself a child of the Father just because you have outward circumcision. No. if he's taking you and he's bringing you into a land, then this is what he will do in the land that he brings you into. Listen carefully. So, he says, and I shall take you from among the nations, because there's much confusion among scriptures, that we are taking scriptures and not understanding the timing of the scriptures. So when he takes us out of the nations, I shall gather you out of all the lands, and I shall bring you into your own land. And then I shall sprinkle clean water on you. So then he's the one cleansing us, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness. So he's got to clean us from our filthiness. We can't stay in that place of the flesh. We need to transform. And he says, and from all your idols. So he's got to cleanse us from. So if he's the one who's gathered you, then he's the one who's cleansed you. He's the one who's. So you see, the ones that are being gathered are the ones that are being cleansed. The ones that are coming back to the truth. The ones that are cleansing themselves. Not the ones that are in a religion, but the ones that are truly cleansing themselves. Because who is doing the work? The Father is the one doing the work, because it says I. Not man, not Sanhedrin, not anybody, not rabbis. I am going to do the work. Let's get that straight. Let's get that straight, that this is the work of the Father. This is not the work of man. This is not when man formulates something. This is when the Father is doing what he needs to do. And I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness. So, if you are still walking according to your flesh, the lusts of the flesh, the pride of life, all of that, he's cleansing it. And from all your idols, I cleanse you. And then listen to what he says. I. Who is speaking? Abba Yahuwah, by his Ruach. I shall give you a new heart. So you see, he's got to give us a new heart. Because the heart that's there right now, if he doesn't come and dwell in that heart is wicked. If he does not dwell in this heart, the heart is wicked. Because only by us receiving the deliverer, Yahushua, then we receive the Ruach of Yahuwah. And then it's the Ruach of Yahuwah that convicts us of our wicked ways. And he is the one that is the I, changing the people. We've got to understand this, beloveds, so that we are not deceived in these days. Because we've got to understand the deception is setting us up for something which is called an anti-Messiah. And that's what we've got to understand. And I shall give you a new heart and shall put a new spirit within you. So you see, those that he's gathering, he's going to put his spirit in them. So, who's being gathered? Is it the Father that's gathered? Or is it man that's gathered? Who has gathered? Because if it's the Father that's gathered, then it's the Father that's put his spirit. And listen to why. I shall put a new spirit within you, and I shall take the heart of stone out of you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you. So you see, how are we going to be able to transform if we don't have his spirit? It's the sons of Yahuwah are led by the Ruach of Yahuwah. So if we don't have the Ruach of Yahuwah, we are still not circumcised of heart. That's the bottom line. It's only the Ruach of Yahuwah that he has put in us that is going to do what? The spirit within you. So there's many people that are doing these things out of the flesh, but it's not out of the spirit, because this is the Torah of the spirit. It's the Torah of the spirit, where he's going to write his Torah upon the tablets of our hearts by his spirit. Not because I wake up now and I want to be like a lot of people that are religious, like a lot of the Orthodox Jews within the land that keep the Torah out of obligation. That this is what I've got to do. It's my religion. So they keep it out of religion. And a lot of the Torah movement keep his commands out of religion. And there's no relationship. And the Father is not in it. The Father is not bringing the deliverance of it. The Father is not the one that is working it in them, both to will and to do his good pleasure. And yet, they're walking out something in the flesh, but their hearts are still not circumcised. Their hearts are still filled with malice. And he says, and I shall give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I will put my spirit within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and you shall do them. Then I, again, and I, who's going to do it? The Father. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws and to guard my right rulings, and shall do them. So I am going to do it. He says, and you shall dwell in the land that I gave your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Lord. So who are his people? Those that are going to truly be having his spirit within them and having to walk out his commands. And those are the people that will eventually dwell in the land. So at the end of the day, he is first going to clean them up. While they are still in the nations, he's cleaning them up. And then he's going to bring them into the land. And I shall save you from all your uncleanliness. And I shall call for the grain and increase it. And I shall bring no scarcity of food upon you. We have to read scripture for what it says, beloveds. We can't just be able to follow what man is giving us. We have to follow what the word says. This is the word. This is the word of Yahuwah. And this is what we've got to understand. This is his word. So there is a difference between clean and unclean. He needs to clean us up. And everything about this Torah portion and the next two Torah portions is about clean and unclean. It's about, this is the law of clean and the law of unclean. And we are to know the difference between the clean and the unclean. People keep traditions of men above the word of Yahuwah. And that is a lot of what goes on in the land of Eretz Israel. They keep the traditions of men, and only the religious ones, because remember, the religious ones is only 30% of the land is religious. 70% of the land is non-religious, which makes them not have Yahuwah. Because you are either going to be in religion, or otherwise you will be like a heathen. It's not like Christianity. Christianity, you can still have Yeshua in your heart, but you might not live for him. But you've at some stage received him in your heart. Therefore, you've got constantly the Ruach of Yahuwah working within you. But you've got to understand, Judaism is a religion. It's a religion that you are not keeping according to the Spirit. You are keeping the religion according to man-made customs and traditions. And that is why the people that cannot keep it, if they don't keep that, they don't have anything. And that's what you've got to understand. It's not a case of where they are backslidden. They don't have anything because they know that they cannot keep those traditions. It's difficult for them. They're under the burden of that. They're under the burden of what's been put on them of religion, of do's and don'ts and do's and don'ts and do's and don'ts, of customs and traditions of man, which is what Yeshua said when he said, you have put a heavy yoke upon my people. And this is what we've got to understand. So he talks about clean and unclean. So let's go and look. We are going to go and look at Leviticus chapter 13. So we're just going to touch a little bit today on the leprosy, and then we're going to go into detail into the leprosy with the Torah portion of Metzora. Because the Torah portion of Metzora is about that. So let's just look at quickly Leviticus chapter 13. Let's go back to our Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 13. And we are going to read from verses 29. And Leviticus chapter 13 from verse 29 says, "And these are the unclean, and these are unclean to you among the creeping creatures." Oh, sorry, where am I? I don't even know how I got there. Interesting, we're talking about unclean, and now we're talking about unclean creeping creatures. Leviticus chapter 13 from verse 29, "And when a man or a woman has an infection on the head or in the beard, then the priest shall look at the infection and see if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is a thin yellow hair in it. Then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an eruption, a leprosy of the head or beard. But when the priest looks at the infection or the eruption and sees that it does not appear deeper than the skin, there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut up the one with the infection of the eruption 7 days, and on the 7th day the priest shall look at the infection and see if the eruption has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and the eruption does not appear deeper than the skin." So, and then if we look at verse 34, it says, "And on the 7th day the priest shall look at the eruption and see if the eruption has not spread over the skin and does not appear deeper than the skin. Then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his garments, and he shall be clean." So for 7 days he had to be set apart. For 7 days he was put outside the city, set apart, 7 days for him to be inspected. That's very important that we must understand, that 7 days being put outside. So, if we then look at Leviticus chapter 13 from verses 44, and it says, "He's a leprous man, he's unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean without fail. His infection is on his head." So the infection is a plague, it's a disease, it's a mark. It's a wound, and it's a mark of leprosy. So what mark will we have? Will we have the mark of the world, or will we have the mark of the beast, or will we have the mark of the Father's set-apart mark that He has set apart His people? He has marked them on the foreheads, on their hands, that they are to walk out, keep His ways, keep His right rulings, keep His Torah by His Ruach. It's the Torah of the Spirit written upon the tablets of our hearts. It's important that we understand that. So we are looking at this Torah portion that has everything to do with clean and unclean. And so we need to understand what is clean and what is unclean. So if we look at clean is the word H2889, which is the word tahor. That is the word tahor. Pure, clean, morally, ethically. We are morally and ethically clean. We are clean by the way that we walk before the Father, that people can see our set-apart walk before Him. And it comes from a root word of taher. So one is tahor and one is taher. 2891. And taher is to be clean, be pure, to purify, be morally made clean, a cleanse, purify physically, ceremonially, morally, to be bright. So do you see, to be bright, meaning we carry the presence of the Father that shines through us like a light, so that all can see that light that is shining through us. Interesting. Bright because we are clean. So how do we shine His light without us being clean? And to be clean is to keep according to what he says is clean and what he says is unclean. To what he says this is set apart and this is not set apart. This is what you are to keep. This is what you're not to keep. You are to be able to choose life by obedience to his Torah ways, by his Ruach. So he says, clean because we shine. His light, we are to be clean because we shine his light. Clear, unadulterated. So we are unadulterated. We are not an adulterer, adulterating with the world. We are not an adulterer in fornication, in whoring. To be an adulterer means we are in whoring. Uncontaminated, morally innocent, holy, cleansed. We are purged and we are purified. So, to be unclean is H2930, which is the word tameh. So it's tahor, clean, and tameh, unclean. And now unclean is to be unclean. To become unclean, to become impure. Sexually, religiously, so we can become religiously, ceremonially unclean. We can become unclean by our belief systems, because our belief systems are filled with mixed seed, and therefore we have confusion, which is Babylon, and that's why the Father says, come out of Babylon. We are to touch nothing that is unclean. We are to be set apart. So if he says you are not to be touching things that are unclean, then you are to understand that if it's doctrines of demons, we don't touch it because it's deemed unclean. So, it's ceremonially, it's defiled, sexually, or through idolatry. So if we are sexually unclean or we have idolatry, it's to profane Yahuwah's name. So when we do not walk out his ways, we profane his name. So it's like people say, and they call themselves a believer. They call themselves a Christian, but look at the way they behave. So when we do that, we profane the name of Yahuwah. Because the first thing that they do is they say, they call themselves Christians, but look at the way they behave. So that should put the fear of Yahuwah in us to make sure that we walk ceremonially clean, religiously clean. We don't even want to be religiously clean, no. Religion is what keeps us in destruction. We should be set apart in holiness unto the Father. So, then we become sexually unclean or by idolatry. So we become unclean sexually. We become unclean by our idolatry. So, therefore, we profane the Father's name and we defile it. So, to be defiled, to be contaminated, we defile ourselves and we pollute self. So, the word leprosy is the word H6879. 6879, which is Tazria. So Tzara, that is leprosy, is the word Tzara, which is going to be the next Torah portion, which is Metzora, and that is going to be one who has leprosy, which is Tzara, and that is to be diseased of skin. It's to be leprous. It's to scourge. Tzara brings the Ra at the end, which is the end. At the end, Ra at the end of the word brings the evil. It's Tzara, and the Ra is evil. So if you had leprosy, you would have to go out of the camp for 7 days. They put you out of the camp with the leprosy. Now remember, we are looking at this leading up to the next Torah portion, which is Metzora, which is really they're connected. And I was still thinking of doing one whole combination, but the Father didn't want that. That was why it took me long, because I wanted to combine them, and the Father never wanted me to combine them. So this is setting the stage for us to understand the next Torah portion that's really got to be able to do with the Lashon Hara, with the speaking of evil that comes with the Mitzorah, that comes with the Tzara. Tzara has a lot to do with speaking things that we shouldn't. So that's why it says, when they were leprous, they would have to go out of the camp for 7 days. So let's just go look at Numbers chapter 12. So we go look at Numbers chapter 12. So that we lay a foundation for the next Torah portion, because we have to lay the foundation for the next Torah portion, which is really going to look at leprosy a little bit deeper. And this is going to be for us to understand what comes out of our mouths. So in Numbers chapter 12, and we're going to read from verses 1, and it says, Now Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe because of the Cushite woman whom he had taken, for he had taken a Cushite woman. So you see, they're speaking up against Moshe, not because Moshe has done anything wrong, but because they are Lashon Hara, they are speaking evil from something that of his wife. So they're actually gossiping about him because of the wife that he has taken. So you see, I had to understand this, because there's a difference between when we speak something and we are gossiping about something that's got nothing to do with anybody's business. Moses' wife is the wife that he chose. Why should they have something to do about that? So if that is the wife that he chose, and that is the wife that the father gave, who is anybody? Who were they to go and speak about his wife? Do you understand? We've got it, because people use Lashon Hara to many things. People use Lashon Hara as gossip to many things. Gossip is gossip, which means that it's no business of yours. Who he married was no business of yours. So there's many people that want to talk about other people's business that is no business of yours. That is Lashon Hara, and they bring evil out of that which they speak. So this was no business of theirs. He married a Cushite woman. That is where he was. He was in the wilderness, and he went and he married Zipporah, or he had taken this Cushite woman. And they said, has Yahuwah spoken only to Moshe? Has he only spoken to Moshe? So we've got to wait and see. Just hang on a second. It could be that he had taken a woman. I think it's more like he had taken a woman, because a Cushite looks like he had. I don't think it was Zipporah. I think it could have been that Moses maybe took another wife, and it was a Cushite woman. And they are now speaking about this. Has Yahuwah spoken? So because of this, because of what he's done, they're now judging him based on the call that the father has called him. Now understand, whether he's taken the Cushite woman or not, he has a call before the father. And now they are standing on his call. And they are saying, well, does the father only speak through Moshe? So a person is called, a person is doing a work for the father, and then someone comes and says, well, the father doesn't only work through you. The father works through me. And then they start to bring things behind your back. And at the end of the day, if you have a look at everything, the root of all of that is jealousy. It's jealousy. So they were jealous. And so they're using something now to start up their conversation. And it happens to be his Cushite wife that he took. Has he not spoken through us? And Yahuwah heard it. And the man, Moshe, was very humble, more than all the men who were on the face of the earth. Imagine, that is what's spoken of Moses. He was a very humble man. And suddenly, Yahuwah said to Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, you three come out to the tent of appointment. So the three came out. Now you see, we tend to forget that there is one that's listening to our conversation. We sometimes think the person is not listening to the conversation because the person is not present. But the Father is the one hearing all the conversations that are being spoken, and that's what we've got to understand. So the Father hears the conversation. This is his anointed, set-apart person of the Father that he is using to be able to speak through him. And they are now saying, is he the only one that hears the Father? Now they are infringing on his call when it's got nothing to do. The Cushite wife that he married has nothing to do with his call. But now they're infringing on his call. They are stepping on the toes of his call. And suddenly, Yahuwah said to Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, okay, come to the tent of appointment. And he said, hear now my word. If your prophet is of Yahuwah, I make myself known to him in a vision, and I speak to him in a dream. Not so with the servant Moshe. He is trustworthy in all my house. I speak with him mouth to mouth, and plainly, and not in riddles, and he sees the form of Yahuwah. So why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? And the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against them, and he left. And Aaron said to Moshe, O my master, please do not hold against us the sin in which we have done foolishly, in which we have sinned. So what happens? And the cloud turned away from above the tent, and look, Miriam was leprous. So Miriam became leprous because of her evil tongue. Her tongue that is speaking gossip. As white as snow, and Aaron turned towards Miriam, and look, a leper. And then you see verse 12, please do not let her be as one dead. When coming out of its mother's womb, and our flesh half consumed. And Moshe cried out to Yahuwah, saying, O Al, please heal her, please. So he pleads on behalf of his sister. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, if her father had put spit in her face, would she not be ashamed even 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp 7 days, and after that, let her be readmitted. So understand, even though he healed her leprosy, she was to be put out of the camp 7 days. So when you put out of the camp 7 days, you are put out of the camp 7 days for you to come to your senses so that you can understand your mouth is wicked. It's spoken wicked things, and it needs to come under submission. And so it needs to be corrected. And you have to be out of your camp 7 days for you to be able to come to the senses of your sin, for you to understand what it is that you have done. Now, if we would learn to do this in congregations, I don't think we would have as much division in congregations that we have, or in fellowships that we have, because the problem is the person wants to keep carrying on, and yet at the end of the day, there is nothing being done to them in order for them to be able to curb their evil tongue from being able to speak the evil that they do. But what they must understand is that the Father at the end of the day is going to bring them to task. And they will become leprous. There will be sickness, some or other sickness that will start to come upon their body. And so we are going to look at this before we're going to go and look at the half Torah. So let's just look at Matthew chapter 18, because this is very important. If we look at Matthew chapter 18, in Matthew chapter 18, this is what it says from verse 15. And if your brother sins against you, go and convict him. So if your brother's done something wrong to you, you go and you speak to your brother. You don't go and speak to everybody else. You don't go and discuss it with everybody else. You go and speak to your brother. So if you're hovering something against your brother, go and make right with your brother, or else your heart is never going to be cleared, because you are going to keep carrying this in your own heart because you don't know how to release it. So it says, if your brother sins against you, go and convict him between you and him alone. So if you're having something against your brother, go and convict your brother, not for you to go and discuss it with everybody else. Go to your brother alone and go say to your brother, look, there what you did, that was not right. What you did there, that was not right. You don't go and discuss it with everybody else. You go and you confront your brother with it. So if you have a grievance against your brother, or your brother's done something to you, or your brother's upset you, or you are offended with your brother, you don't go tell the world about your offense, because that is already when you want revenge for what your brother has done. No, you go to your brother and you say to your brother, look, that which you did there, that was not correct. That which you said there, that was not correct. I got offended, I got upset, I got whatever. Sort it out with your brother. And then what does it say? If he hears you, you have gained your brother. So repentance can come out of that to say, forgive me, I was wrong, I did wrong, or whatever the case may be, I don't know. But you sort it out with each other. It's between you and your brother, so that you can gain your brother. But if he does not hear, take with you 2 more. Then you're going to take other people with you and say, right, let's just discuss the situation now. This is the situation. I'm confronting it. I've got witnesses with me right now that I'm going to confront the situation with you so that we can resolve this. And if you still choose not to do so, it says 1 or 2 more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word might be established. And if he refuses to hear them, say it to the assembly. Now you will tell the assembly. And if he refuses even to hear the assembly, then you let him be to you like the nations and a tax collector that you will ignore. So you will put them out of the camp until they come to their senses, until they are able to repent. You put them out of the camp until they're able to repent. Because otherwise, they keep breeding their evil, because it's the wickedness of their own hearts. There's the uncircumcision of the heart. So let us look at the Haftorah. So the Haftorah is from 2 Kings. So let us go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings, and we are going to read. It's supposed to be from chapter 4, from verses 42 to 5, verses 19. We are going to read chapter 5 from verses. We are going to read from chapter 5, from verses 1 and then verse 8. And Naaman, commander of the army of the sovereign of Aram, was a great man in the eyes of his master, and highly respected, because by him Yahuwah had given deliverance to Aram, and he was a brave man, but leprous. So he was a commander, he was a brave man, but he was leprous. And in the time of when they went out to battle, he brought let's just read verse 2. And the Arameans had gone out on the raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. And she served the wife of Naaman. So understand, this was a Israelite girl that was like a servant serving Naaman. And so you can say Naaman or Naaman. And this young girl understood, and this is where she turned around, and she says, and she said to her mistress, so she said to her mistress, to Naaman's wife, if only my master were with the prophet who is in Shimron, then he would recover him of his leprosy. So she knew about a prophet, and this was the prophet Elisha, and that if he would go to the prophet Elisha, Elisha would heal him of his leprosy. And so we are going to pick up the story again, because eventually he goes and he speaks to the he sends a letter to the sovereign of Israel, and eventually the sovereign of Israel tears his garments, and then by verse 8 it says, and it came to be, when Elisha the man of Eloah heard that the sovereign of Israel had torn his garments, that he sent to the sovereign, saying, why have you torn your garments? Please, let him come to me, so that he knows that there is a prophet in Israel. So you see, he sent a letter so that the sovereign would be able to pray for him, so that because it says, and he brought the letter, verse 6, and he brought the letter to the sovereign of Israel, which said, and now when this letter comes to you, see, I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, so that you shall recover him of his leprosy. So this is when the king now tears his garments, because how is he, the king, going to heal this man of leprosy? He cannot heal the man of leprosy. But Elisha, being a man of Yahuwah, says to him, let the man come to me. For him to know that there is a prophet, that he will know the sovereign, that he will know Abba Yahuwah is the only true Yah of the nations of the world, because he's the Yah of the nation of Israel, and therefore this man will know that there is no other Yah except for Yahuwah. And so he went, so we look and see now verse 10, and Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and you shall wash 7 times in the Jordan, that your flesh might be restored to you and be clean. So do you see, the prophet gives an instruction, and the instruction was, go and cleanse yourself in the river Jordan. It was in the river Jordan 7 times, so that he could be cleansed. So there is a cleansing process that we need to go through in order to come out of that uncleanness. We need to go, because we are leprous. We are leprous in our heart, we are leprous in our mouth, we are leprous in many ways, and we need to cleanse ourselves we got to be washed by the word, because the water represents the word. We've got to be transformed by the renewal of our mind, by the washing of the word. The word is what sets us free. And Naaman became very wroth. So look there. He had an issue in his heart. He had an issue with anger. He had an issue with wrath that was within him. So Naaman became very wroth. So you see that this is an attitude of the heart. His heart was the attitude. And the attitude that was in his heart brought out the sickness in his body. That is what we must understand. And went away and said, see, I said to myself, he would certainly come out to me and stand and call on the name of Yahuwah, his Eloah. So he would call out the name of Yahuwah, his Eloah, because it's the prophet's Eloah, it's not his. And wave his hand over the place and recover the leprosy. So understand, he's angry now because the prophet has told him to do something. And he doesn't want to listen to what the prophet has to say, because he's getting angry because the prophet has spoken a word that he does not want, because he wants things to be done in his way. He's a commander, he's a man that knows how to take charge, and he's got arrogance, and he's got pride, and he gets angry by what people say. And the prophet has now told him to do something, but it hasn't worked out the way he wanted. So how many times do we expect things to go our way, and we get upset with people because of our own mindsets and our own attitudes that we have, because we want things to go our way. Now listen. And then, but no man become wroth. Okay, so verse 12, and not the Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus. So you're saying now, why must he go into the river Jordan? Why can't he go to his rivers in Damascus? Better than all the water of Israel. So now his arrogance is now speaking out of his mouth. And this is these critical, judgmental people, these critical people that are always putting people down, that are always putting everything down, everything around them. All they know how to speak out of their mouth is to criticize everything. The prophet has spoken, the prophet has given an instruction, but in his arrogance, he criticizes to say, well, why do I have to go to the river Jordan? There's better rivers than that. So it's criticizing. And now he says, could I not wash in them and be clean? And he turned and he went away in rage. So understand, first he was wrath, now it's rage. So do you see the attitude of this man's heart? So do you understand why he says it's the circumcision of the heart? It's the heart that makes us unclean. It's what comes out of our mouth that's going to make us unclean. It's not what is going to be what goes into the mouth. We will cover that in the next Torah portion. It's not what's going to come out. It's not what's going to go into the mouth that makes us unclean, but what comes out of the mouth that makes us become unclean because of his critical and judgmental attitude. This man has a critical and judgmental attitude, and this is the problem that we have. And he went away in rage. So we see that he's a critical and judgmental person, and he has to stand against what has been told him to do. So many people are like that. They have leprous hearts because of their critical and judgmental tongue. And in this day and age, they might not get leprosy, but they get a lot of other sicknesses in their body because of their evil tongue. And this is what we've got to understand. So in Metzora, we will have a look and see that it's not what goes in the mouth that's going to make you leprous, but what goes out of the mouth. And eventually he goes. Then he went down. So they told him, and his servants came near and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had spoken to you a great matter, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? So what are the prophets speaking to us in the moment? Wash and be clean. Be clean by the water of the word, because it's only the word of truth that's going to make you clean. But the problem is, people criticize and judge the words that come forth out of the mouths of the prophets because of their own religious and callous and leprous hearts. Then he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of Allah, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So the Father wants us to be clean by his word, so that we will know the word, so that the word will come and set us free from our leprous ways. That's the uncircumcised heart that we have, that speaks the evil out of our mouths, that many times we can criticize and judge situations as opposed to listening to what the Father says. So if he would have just listened to what the Father said, but people had to come and speak to him. Now do you understand what was the leprosy in his body? The leprosy in his body was because he was a man that would criticize, judge. He was filled with arrogance. He was filled with pride. And therefore, he was wrath and he had rage in him. And this is the problem. Let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I praise and I thank you, my Father, for this powerful word that you have spoken to us tonight. And I just want to thank you, my Father, that you are coming to set your captives free, so that we may be able to not be leprous, that we will not have callous hearts, leprous hearts that are like stone. You want to take out of us that heart of stone and replace it with a heart of flesh. And then you want us to be able to have circumcised hearts so that we may walk out your ways. And we may return back to your ways, knowing that we will understand what is in our hearts, the evil where we don't want to keep your Torah, but we have ways of the flesh that we walk out that we need to change. So Abba Yahuwah, I pray, give us the grace that we need by your Ruach, Abba Father, that we will bridle our tongue, and that you will help us to have a heart that will be broken, a contrite, broken heart, a heart that will be softened by your Ruach HaKodesh, a heart that will be filled with your Ruach HaKodesh, not with religious things, not with a religious way, but filled by your Ruach, so that we may walk out your purposes and your plans. In Yeshua's name I pray this. Amen.